Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the BuzzStream podcast. I'm your host, Vince Nero, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by the one and only Garrett Sussman. He's the Director of Marketing at iPullRank. I was able to not meet in person still, but I saw him in person at SEO Week where he gave a fantastic presentation all about personalization in AI. And I think this is such a undervalued, underappreciated, underlooked at, under-talked about part of the whole AI discussion, because it's essentially like, what is it? Like the blind social, the dark social, where it's like there's all these clicks that are happening. There's all this conversation that is happening with AI that we really probably don't have direct influence in and potentially don't even see what's happening. So it was a very inspiring talk, and I'm going to needle Garrett with all sorts of questions about it today. But before I do, I just want to remind everybody, if you like what you see, please give a thumbs up. Please share, subscribe, comment on this stuff, share it with your colleagues, all that good stuff, because the more we do that, the more I can have great guests on like Garrett. Secondly, please go ahead and check out List IQ, our AI-powered media list building tool that helps you build lists right from Google News. It's super quick, super fast. It streamlines a lot of that manual work digging to try to find email addresses and job titles and bios and recent articles. It does it in a few seconds. It's getting some great feedback, and I think it's a real difference maker in the whole process for building great lists. So with that out of the way, let's get to the podcast. Garrett, how you doing, man? Thank you so much for joining.
Vince, so we're only allowed to talk digitally. If we were in person, I would walk right by you, like at the event. No, man, it's great. I wish next year we'll get to talk, but thank you for having me on. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, and I've loved the stuff that iPullRank does. I mean, I'm a big fan of everything, all the research. I talk about your work, I talk about Mike's work all the time. I mean, I know that you guys have been kind of really at the forefront of a lot of this AI stuff. So it was really great to hear you talk about the personalization thing. I think, when I have been trying to write a lot of content about this nowadays too, just trying to, figure my way out along the way as all of us are. And I keep coming back to this idea of the personalization. So when people are logged into ChatGPT or Gemini's and whatnot, they are getting potentially different answers than what API is pulling, and all these studies are typically built off of. So it makes me think that, hey, we're only looking at a piece of the picture. How big is this picture that we're missing? How big is the slice of the pie with personalization?
I think, let's say we're at the early stages of what's going to be really disruptive. I mean, it's not like something we're unfamiliar with, in the sense of, for any of us who search in local search, like personalization has always been a thing. I would not expect to find a pizza place in Virginia versus, if you look in Connecticut. I think that different results have been an expectation in different contexts. What we're not ready for is every single search is going to have a hyper-personal context.
Yeah. And so you did this really cool study, and we'll kind of jump right into it, because I think what it kind of uncovered were potentially some tactics, some blind spots, but just kind of how this stuff works. I guess the first question I wanted to ask is this idea I think you brought up in the talk about opting into this, right? Is this something that everybody's doing? Is this something you have to opt into? Do you think it's going to become standardized where you can't really not opt in or opt out?
So I think, first off, there's different levels of personalization, right? Like, we know we can use Google and search, or we can go to an incognito mode where it does strip away some of the context already. So Google is already tracking your search history, for instance, and that might influence your search, whether you're opted into this next level personalization. What Google launched last year at I/O, and with it, the end of May and announcements, depending on when this is published, we might see more information, but they have a program called Google Personal Intelligence that is opt-in, where you can connect your Google account, and it basically can start to talk to other parts of the Google ecosystem. So we're talking Gmail, we're talking photos, we're talking calendar. And now think of it as if I'm doing a search and all of a sudden Google can look through my Gmail history and see if there's an email that I've received that's relevant to my search that can influence the information that I'm looking for, then I'm going to all of a sudden see a different result. One perfect example, which we'll talk about more, but like from my study that I did, is when I connected my own account to Google Personal Intelligence and I asked what is the best hoodie recommendation, it goes into my email. It sees that I bought 4 hoodies from Aviator Nation. It literally cites the receipt email confirmations and says, well, since you like Aviator Nation hoodies, I recommend these other hoodies. So you start to think about the implications of the output in AI mode based on this Google Personal Intelligence, which, to your point, is opt-in right now. It's not by default for everybody. You have to choose to participate.
Yeah, I mean, there's a different version of this kind of floating around the digital PR world and link building world, I guess, to a certain extent, of the like AI summarization that happens in certain email platforms. And we just did this big study with the team at Era where we looked at how AI summarizes emails. And in that context, I mean, it's clearly, or I shouldn't say clearly because maybe people don't know, but it is going through your search history and helping to summarize like email threads, right? And in some cases, it would take, we looked at it for all the context, like the subject line, how likely is it to influence what's in the summary? Because the thought being like, if a journalist gets an email, are they just reading the summary and they're not going to read your full pitch and whatever? So, but I mean, it got me thinking along the lines of your talk too, where it's just like, okay, so this is like just one little piece of the puzzle of just Gmail, for instance, and it's not just Gmail that, Microsoft has one for AI summaries, and so does who am I skipping? Apple as well. So next question would be, with this, is it just Gmail? I mean, you look just at Google, the Google ecosystem, right? Not the other platforms.
So what I will say is they all exist in their own ecosystem. You have, for instance, ChatGPT with OpenAI. The big thing with ChatGPT is memory, where with ChatGPT, they currently collect all of your interactions and build a memory file of everything that you've shared that would potentially influence any sort of searches or just interactions there. ChatGPT is moving in this direction as well. Actually, as recently as a couple of weeks ago, I noticed they updated their own FAQs that they now connect to Gmail. Previously, they had a Gmail connector, but you had to explicitly ask it to look at your Gmail in order to include that in the context. But recently, they've had an implicit connection. So whether or not these different ecosystems, whatever your LLM, choice is, the personalization, the memory, the connection to these other data sources is going to be a product differentiator that makes it a better experience. So I anticipate we're only going to continue to see more of these personalizations to give you a better search or AI assisted experience.
Yeah, I mean, and this will maybe lead into the study a little bit, but when does this opt-in happen? Like when talking about, for instance, the ChatGPT integration with Gmail, for instance, like I pretty much use Gmail, my Google account, to log into everything rather than like creating a separate screen name or a username and password. It's like, do you want to use your Google to log in? Like, you want to use your Apple, whatever. So then you have to authorize, right? Can this look at this information? Is that where that happens? Are we
Yeah, and they're not like really forcing it at us yet. I mean,
okay?
we saw over the past year how Google is working with AI mode, where at first they announced it and like you can kind of get to it, but you have to fight to find it. Then they add it to like one of the tabs in search.
Hmm.
Then they start adding it to like every button and in AI overviews. I feel like they're going to have a similar approach with Google Personal Intelligence, where right now you have to like search through Google's, settings to find the ability to connect personal intelligence, and it's only available in the US. It's not international at this point. So right now it's a hard opt-in where you have to give it permission to everything and you have to really find it yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, so let's segue into the study because It sounds like that's what you did, was create some fake people and then dug through the settings and enabled it up. So yeah, let's talk about how you kind of seeded this information to like create these fake people. It was very, very interesting. If you want to, yeah.
Yeah, so I was really curious. Okay, to what extent can we influence or at least get a sense of the way that these different connected apps would influence search results? And so me and my team, Michael Tando and Kate Dombrowski, basically we set up 3 different accounts. We had a tabula rasa, brand new, never been used Gmail account, not connected to anything. We had a second one, completely brand new, not connected to anything, that was connected to personal intelligence. And then I used myself as a guinea pig with my bloated, decades old personal Gmail account connected to
And hoodies.
everything, buying hoodies, drinking coffee, sending, fun emails to my friends and families with ridiculous memes. And so what we then did is over the course of basically 3 weeks, we set up a series of prompts, similar prompts across 8 different products, like e-commerce products like coffee machines and running shoes, finding a bank, finding an SEO agency. And then I set up a series of 6 prompts that were like, what is the best X? What is the best X for like these 2 different attributes that were relevant to that industry? If you could recommend 3 different brands, what would you recommend? And so we had that standardized format across the 8 different types of products. The 3 of us did it, ran it every single day for 3 weeks manually because it's a personal account. You can't just scrape it. We did have a Python, script set up where we could easily like copy and paste all the links, all the content. And so we ran it over 3 weeks. And what we did is halfway through, I sent an email from my iPullRank account to each of these 3 different accounts across the 8 products saying, hey, for finding a product that wasn't being surfaced in the results, that wasn't really coming up, a real product. And I said, hey, I like this product. For instance, in the running shoes, it was Solomon. I was like, I really like Solomon shoes. It's great because it's durable and it's comfortable. You should check it out. Signed, Garrett. And I sent it to myself. And almost immediately in the AI mode output, you would start to see when I asked for a recommendation, hey, you should check out Solomon. It's a great brand. It's rustic. It's comfortable. And your friend Garrett likes it. And it actually, what's really interesting is it cites the specific email that I sent it from. And we saw a statistically significant lift in brand recommendations for ones that were, that referenced this. Same with photos. We did the same experience with photos. Photos did not have the same impact as email did, but email was like a jump from 20% visibility to 60% visibility across most of the brands. So we're talking about like a real impact from hyper-personalization.
Yeah, it's interesting. I want to touch on the photos one real quick because in that AI summary, Gmail or email AI summary study we did, that was something that the platforms didn't seem to really pick up on. Like if you had a photo in there, I think it was only Microsoft would say there is a photo or there is an attachment, but it wouldn't be able to read it and say this is this thing and therefore, So that's interesting. I mean, with any of those things though, I'm always like, it's probably coming though, even if they can't do it.
I had a hypothesis that it would, the idea is I literally went to a department store and took pictures of myself with shoes and was like, would you recommend, would I expect to see this like Adidas shoe show up as a recommendation just by seeing the shoe picture in my photos? And it did show up. Like, it's not to say that it didn't influence the results. It just wasn't as obvious and pervasive and specific as the emails were, which makes sense because with text, it's so clear of the intent of an email recommending a shoe than just some photo in the context of all these photos.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm curious. So this was 3 weeks and you were able to kind of engineer this recognition pretty instantly, it sounds like, right? um, how, it's so hard to keep track of this stuff. I mean, I just saw something from Profound that was published talking about how quickly citations start showing up on average. I think it was ChatGPT. It was something like 6 days. Does that sound right? 6 hours, 6 days after publish. So what I'm wondering, I guess, is do you know, is there a baseline at this point that you guys, at least at iPullRank, are kind of talking with clients about like how long it takes to kind of influence this stuff from a non-personalization level? Like, let's just say in general, baseline AI, how long does it take to start to show up in results?
So I'm going to give you a classic SEO answer, but it so much depends, but I'll explain why. You have to think about the context of the types of searches. For instance, when we're talking PR, for instance, and there's like the news media, that's going to be a very different time frame of freshness than some sort of
Best
evergreen.
hoodies or something.
Exactly. Exactly. And I feel like there's a lot of volatility right now across these different brands. I mean, we've talked a lot about iPullRank. I know you discussed it with Mike, is the idea of the query fan out, which is when you are doing some sort of search, whether that is on Google or ChatGPT, it's not just trying to find what is the best answer for that search. It's identifying like 5, 10, 15, 20 related synthetic searches. And then if it isn't just in the training data, it needs some sort of like retrieval augmented generation. It needs some support from what's out there. Then it'll generate the output. It'll go and identify selection criteria past passages. So it'll take those related synthetic searches. It'll look at the top citation links. It'll identify, what is appropriate to cite some of them, and then give you your answer. And there's so much nuance. Like, I think it's really fun to see all these data studies come out. And even my own experiment, I always want to caveat, like, this was statistically significant, but
Right.
this is in the context of
Yeah.
this like specific lab ish type of well, actually this was more of a field experience experiment than my other ones, but I feel like we should take all of these with a grain of salt, and we should look through everything through the lens of our individual business and industry.
Yeah, I mean, well, so maybe a better way to ask that question would be like, what are some of the, levers that impact the time? If you're thinking about this stuff from agency or your practitioner and you're trying to get your brand, if I am BuzzStream and we want to be the best digital PR tool, and I'm going out, that seems to be something that's probably if I'm Google, I'm updating that every 6 months, maybe, these days, maybe it's like 3 months because of, AI is changing everything so quickly. It used to be longer, but like, so maybe it's every 3 months. So is that what the expectations would be for something like that, where you're just like, okay, how fresh is this type of question? And then if I'm trying to do whatever GEO, AIO, strategy out there, what do timelines look like? And then I want to hear that answer. And then with the personalization thing, do we think it's like way quicker?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I want to reframe your reframe because
Ooh,
I'm
all
with
right.
you in the sense that, well, think about it. Okay, if you're going for, a PR play where you want to show up in a specific article, the way that we're searching, especially in an LLM, is different. Like, we're not just using keyword ease. It's a different mental model for how we search and how we converse with it. So we're already using a much more complex type of prompt with natural language and what we specifically might want to find. Because it's going to be a specific explicit context, which was another big part of my talk, was differentiating between when we provide explicit context in the way that we search versus the implicit context of what it's pulling. The explicit context is going to be much more personalized and look for a personalized result. And as a result of that, if your link your citation is going to address that very specific question, then the freshness matters and you're more likely to show up in a quicker time frame because it's going to be a better result. So I think I think what's hard for marketers to think about and, digital PR specialists is this idea of, we wanted to historically get the most bang for our buck. If I get that citation that drives authority in a really well-known publication, then I'm going to get a ton more value out of that. And that is still true. But as you get to these more niche and specific types of queries, even those obscure links could potentially matter. It's just not going to drive the same sort of value as we're used to seeing, where you get that one link and now you're going to rank for everything under the sun.
Yeah. I mean, it is really a big mindset shift. I've been working on this post. I was having a conversation with another agency, and we were talking about like, do you talk about do you talk about AI citations or mentions with clients? And like, I was asking like, what are they more interested in? And it seems like people who are more used to the SEO world and link building world are chasing citations and don't care that much about mentions, because like maybe you can get a click on it, and I don't think that's necessarily right. I feel like it's probably unique to every situation, but there's probably equal footing for all of them. You want to show up everywhere where you can, but I that made me kind of rethink some of this stuff too, as to kind of the value of each of these. To your point, like it used to be a one-to-one thing where you get a link and that could be correlated to helping you rank. But now it's like you get a citation, and then what does that correlate to? It's like, so it's a very just, we don't, I feel like we're not there yet as an industry. Like nobody really knows the through line yet all the way.
No, and it's so volatile and it's changing, and it makes our jobs really, really difficult to prove value for the work that we're doing. And so, the way that we look at these different KPIs, I think that the other aspect of it is consumer behavior. Mainstream search behavior is going to be changing more and more over time. And so as a business, I think you need to be locked into what your offering is, who your audience is, and how they're consuming information, and start to reverse engineer from there, because you really can't just do the same playbook as anybody else. And this is the same for PR. I know we're going to touch on this, but like one really interesting context for PR and citations that's tied to hyper-personalization is when we did an explicit experiment with Profound, where I appended information to these prompts. So what I did was I said, hey, I am a man who makes this much money, and this is my job, and this is what I'm into. And I had 4 of those. And I'm a woman who makes this much money, and I'm a business owner, and I'm into this and that and the other thing. And then I looked at the same product prompts, and we looked at that over a year. And what was interesting when we started to look at the citations was, for some of the female running shoes prompts, we were seeing citations specifically from female media publisher, like, Women's Running World. I forget exactly what it was, but that wasn't showing up in some of the male persona ones. So you start to think about it of like, if your citations are specific to the person who's searching, then the way that you strategize and where you want to show up is going to be completely different of just a high level authority versus a audience targeted level authority.
Yeah. I mean, I always used to think with news outlets, it's like when people talk about them from an SEO perspective, it's like relevancy in some cases, we're talking about like general, like a CNN or something, like relevancy sometimes goes out the door because it's like they are wild card like sites. Like you get a top tier news link and it's great. It can, but then the other side of the coin is like talk about, oh, you need to be relevant. You need to get relevant links. So, the conversation is like, okay, well then how is like CNN relevant to this site that sells screws or something? It's like my customer might be there, but a relevant link is like from a construction industry site or something. But anyway, I think that this is starting to, if not reinvigorate or support, bring back that support for the relevant links and relevant citations, just like matching the audience. Because that what you said right there, I mean, if you can talk to your client about, hey, this big link might be great, but if I'm getting you a specific link on this specific women's industry magazine, like that's where your client is, that's where the customer is. Like in a personalized world, that's where they're going to be showing up. That's what they're going to be getting served. Yeah. Yeah, fascinating stuff, man. Okay, so besides emails, you said
Yeah.
we touched on some images. What other stuff were they pulling in?
So there were a lot of anecdotal types of emails. And one thing I will encourage everyone, please continue to give to the industry, like run your experiments. I want your data too. There's so many more experiments ideas that have come out of this. Like, so one thing that's interesting in the PR, like PR indirectly, is newsletters, placements in newsletters, in the sense that I had one anecdote where there is an awesome SEO newsletter that I subscribe to by Marco Giordano, SEO Statistics. And I was asking about productivity and productivity tools, and it referenced 3 tools. And when I looked at the email citation, it came from the body of a newsletter that he had written from 3 months ago. And then here's the thing that's going to like break your brain is I went to find it in my inbox. I didn't open that email. It was an unopened email. So you start to think about the implications of, and this will change over time. Like I think, what I found in my experiment might not be the case later, but we really need to expand that, kind of what you were saying about a placement in CNN. It's like even mentions, even if you're not getting the link on the articles, those matter too now. Like I think from a digital PR standpoint, you have a brand, because I know so many for the longest time in the industry, it's like, is it a follow or no follow? Follow, no follow. And like the biggest like news publishers like the New York Times of the world were always no follow. But even Forbes was really weird about that, about like paying for it. Still are. But now all of a sudden they don't have control over that with LLMs. Like the mentions matter too. So you start to think about that where we're used to in the big, digital media publications, but also in any newsletter, in any type of, and eventually I expect more. So technically it's connected to your calendar, but I wasn't like planning a trip, for instance. So I didn't have any specific examples of, oh, we looked at your calendar and you're going to this baseball game on Friday, so maybe you should get, running shoes or get a jersey for that. Like,
Right. But yeah, it could. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was wondering too, because there were a couple instances with the AI summaries that we did where there were links within the article. And sorry, I just like went for a walk. I feel like I have a bug on me or something. There were a couple instances where there were links in the article, and we were trying to differentiate whether or not they went to the links to pull out information that then they would cite in the summaries. That only happened a few times in like Microsoft. So it didn't look like Google was there, but like, again, you could see there might be that type of thing happening. So it's like you get a mention in a newsletter, you get, you show up, maybe it is a link in a newsletter. Like, yeah, that, why not touch every place you can, like digital PR then just becomes this huge, the audience or the targets for outreach are infinite now.
it's hard to prove our value too. Like another example where there's kind of like a smoking gun, which it's nice with the emails and the photos where you actually see the citations. And it's like you see the little Gmail icon and it's like, oh, that's where it came from. But your search history, and we know this from classic search, you don't see that. One example that I showed, which really highlighted the query fan out and how personalized that is over the course of the experiments, one of the products was streaming networks. And I was asking it, what streaming networks would you recommend for me? And it knew from different conversations that I had a wife and a daughter, and it knew my daughter's name. She's 4 years old. And so when I had a simple objective query that was like, what is the best streaming service for me? It would recommend family streaming services. And then when I look in the citations on the side, I'm seeing a CNET article that specifically says, what are the best family streaming services? And that happens in the fan out before you even get to, the results or wherever you potentially would be cited for that query. So our strategy is just needs to be expanded. We need to take more credit, and it's also getting so much more complex.
Yeah, well, so that's where I was going to go. I mean, we can talk about how this is more difficult, right? As agencies, as marketers, for a lot of this stuff, but I think there is a lot more opportunity too. So like in the presentation, you kind of had like a subtle tongue in cheek, but maybe not, this idea of send newsletters, like seed your customers, right, with this. And from a marketing perspective, it makes sense where you're just like, hey, if you're like, I'm BuzzStream, we have a newsletter, I should be talking about our BuzzStream stuff and why we are the best digital PR tool, whatever. So that now when the AI reads your emails, it's like, oh, have you checked out BuzzStream? Like that makes sense. And obviously the marketer is going to go and ruin this somehow, but there, I feel like there are some potential ways you alluded to in the talk. I was hoping that you could give some thoughts on some tactics to think about this realistically.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the first thing you should do is understand your personas and understand it in the context of your business and what's most important. So for instance, doing some research, if you are in B2B and you're typically maybe looking for the jobs to be done, like or your firmographics, like understanding that persona in that way versus if you're B2C, maybe you want to know the psychographics, the demographics of your personas. Lock in who that audience is. Try to understand how they search. One of the biggest takeaways I was trying to replicate almost a synthetic version of these different personas in Gmail, like subscribe to the newsletters, follow the influencers. We haven't seen a lot of social yet. I will caveat saying, like, I haven't seen anything explicitly in Google Personal Intelligence saying like, hey, we're going to like look at whoever you're following on social media and those influencers and take,
It's not pulling in your Google Plus history.
Right. It's absolutely the Google, such a good throwback, and all my Google Glasses recordings as well. Now, no, but creating like a synthetic persona, or like, because I know with like news organizations, they know their audiences, they know who they're talking to, and stop pretending like you're trying to be everything to everyone. Like, if you are a publisher or if you are a brand and you appeal to a certain type of demographic, lean into it first before you try to expand your total addressable market. Like, that was one of the interesting things when we were looking at banks. And, if we gave the context of, if I was a software engineer, that explicit context, that was my job, it was more likely to recommend Ally and SoFi, like what brands identify with certain persona traits. So I think there's a lot of kind of self-reflection and auditing that you should be doing of like, what is your positioning and your messaging out there? Where are you being placed? What are you being associated with semantically? What are the types of publications that you might be organically being placed on? And then if that's not the narrative, then you need to make a conscious strategy to be placed on the types of publications or associated with the organizations that you want to be. I know that wasn't necessarily like in the weeds of like the email marketing, but part of that is coordinate with the newsletters,
right, if
that you would want
to. Yeah,
exactly. And also be a little prescriptive about how you're talked about in those newsletters, especially if you're paying for it, because the way that you are framed in the newsletter is going to be ingested by the LLM.
Yeah, I mean, that's like a PR 101 recommendation I feel like we used to have all the time as an agency. Like when I was with Siege Media, you would work with their in-house PR teams, and it would be like, well, what does the SEO team think? And really, it's just like a general good marketing best practice. Like, well, anytime you mention our brand, make sure you mention this keyword with it, right? And it's like, that still holds true today, but it's just maybe a little more exaggerated or more important. I'm curious, it got me thinking. I just wrote this down. Did you get anything were you able to see if Google pulled trashed content from, like trashed emails?
So I didn't find anything that was in the trash, and that is, but that's also more of a reflection of like, I don't trash a lot of emails. I just open them and they disappear. But there was one anecdotal experience of spam in my email where it was like one of those weird scammy like Costco
Oh, I
email
remember this from the deck
addresses.
now, I think, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it was like a series of letters in the subject line, and like you go to the
Yeah.
email and it's like a broken image, but like it referenced that I forget what the product was. I want to say it was like one of the shopping products, but that came up and it was a one-off. But like the fact that that is a possibility should scare every marketer in their boots ever. It's weird, man.
Yeah, I mean, my mind immediately goes to this idea of like, I should be sending more marketing emails, not necessarily like email, like pitching to journal. I'm talking about like from a brand perspective, where like, if the idea is you want to, like, you're almost creating like a little mini LLM for your audience by giving them content to cite, right? So it's like, why shouldn't I be, or like, our transcript of this podcast right now, like, I should create this into email and put the full transcript in the email body and send that as an email, right? And because now all of a sudden we have all this stuff and we say that iPullRank is the best agency and we say that BuzzStream is the best digital PR tool, and because I just said those things there, now it might pull, it's like, is it that easy?
Well, so I think there is still the balance between, and this is the conversation right now, is do I create content for the machines or do I create content for the audience? And it is that balance of like not creating content that either A, would be penalized in some capacity, or that your audience is like, really? Did Vince pull that crap with us? Like, did he really drop that? That's super ridiculous. But I mean, to your point, like YouTube search is one of those connected accounts actually
Okay.
in personal intelligence. So even though that's not what you're saying, like the idea that we have this, it gets put on YouTube, it's connected to your YouTube search. The entire transcript of the YouTube episode is
Yeah.
on,
It's now in some LLM, right? It's getting trained on that potentially.
Not email, but YouTube. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
absolutely a channel
Right.
that is connected now. So everywhere, man. Omni-channel, everywhere.
Multimodal.
Mm-hmm.
This has been awesome, man. I don't want to belabor this because I do think the takeaways are like, there's a lot of opportunity, but there's a lot of noise and it's scary, but it's, potential. One thing I like to do at the ends of these is like, what haven't I asked you? What do you think is important that people should know about this stuff that we haven't talked about yet?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to like repeat myself too much, but that's good marketing, right? Is like kind of getting the message across in different ways. But I want marketers to feel empowered and curious and excited about the opportunities. I do think it's going to be messier and trickier as we report to, bosses and stakeholders and clients and whatever sort of position that you're in. And so I think the most important thing that you can be doing in this industry in digital PR is educating yourself about what's happening, what's changing, trying to identify the signal from the noise, because there's too much right now, to run your own experiments and to try to stay close to who you are as a brand and who your audience is, so that you can provide yourself the best chance and opportunity to steal a little bit of that attention that's like so hard these days, because we all have way too many things distracting us. But I think it's important not to lose sight of, we're at the end of the day, we're marketers and you should have fun with it and it's exciting.
Yeah. Great message. Let's leave it there. We'll live in people on a positive note. Okay. We're going to go out there and crush it. Garrett, where can people connect with you if they want to learn more about this stuff?
Yeah. At the park, at my playground. I don't do stuff online. No, I'm kidding. I'm going to go take my 4-year-old daughter. No, I'm a LinkedIn guy these days. I consume on Twitter, but I participate on LinkedIn. So find me there, Garrett Sussman.
Garrett, this has been great. I want to thank you so much for your time. Listeners, again, if you have any questions about this stuff, leave it in the comments. I'm sure Garrett would be more than happy to answer. If you like what you see, reminder to like, subscribe. It goes a long way to helping me keep this thing going. I want to thank you all. I want to thank you, Garrett, and all the hard work that you and your team have been doing in SEO week and all the great stuff. So shout out to the whole iPullRank team. And thanks, listeners, for watching. Good luck out there.